Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Good topic for us today, an angry one with lots of answers, so let's do it. Who got away with murder? Who should be in jail right now? Please remember to like, share your answers, and subscribe. r/Marie-Ann Watson. I just came across this today. It's a subreddit started by the child of a murder victim dedicated to documenting everything she knows about her mother's murderers, who happen to be her foster parents. It's an absolutely crazy story. During a custody battle, in which her mother was trying to get her back from the foster home, the foster parents dismembered her mother right in front of her. She was a child at the time. The foster parents never spent a day in prison for it. Instead, they went on the run with their foster child and forced them to endure years of hellish abuse and torture. She was eventually rescued by a private investigator, and although she and the other foster kids got away from those monsters, they never got justice. The case of Marie-Ann Watson's murder is still unsolved to this day. The foster parents were never charged for it. The daughter, who's an adult now, has been posting to that subreddit for a while now, providing updates about the case. It's absolutely heartbreaking to see threads from years ago where she's getting her hopes up that the case might progress, only for it to hit another wall and go cold again. It seems she has now lost hope that the foster parents will ever be charged, and indeed, one of them has already passed away without receiving justice. She recently finished and released an autobiography about her life called Dandelion Child, which I'd recommend reading. I just listened to a podcast about James Lewis, the prime suspect in the Tylenol murders. Some context. In 1982, 7 people died from taking Tylenol that had been tainted with cyanide. Lewis was convicted of writing a note to Tylenol's parent company Johnson & Johnson, taking credit for the murders and demanding money to make it stop. But he was never charged with the actual murders and was released from jail in 1995. Since then, it's been shown that he likely wrote the extortion letter before the first victims were discovered. He also was in possession of a guide to poisoning, and his fingerprints were found on the section about cyanide. In addition, his fingerprints were found at the scene of a separate murder for which he was suspected, but never charged. Issei Sagawa, Japanese guy who was obsessed with cannibalism of white women, was studying in France, lured a fellow student over to study and have dinner. He killed her and ate her, was caught, but due to weird law technicalities between France and Japan on extradition and stuff, he got to walk free. Still is living back in Japan. My dad's murderer, whoever he is, wherever he is, February 15th, 1974. Police never investigated, so that's that. Robbed and stabbed. The scum who killed Junko Furuta, they got such a light sentence for the crimes they committed. Miyano was sentenced to 20 years in prison. Minato received a 5 to 7 year sentence, Watanabe a 5 to 9 year sentence, and Yo an 8-year sentence. Deplorable and despicable. They should have all had life at the very least. That Japanese guy who ate that poor girl in France back in the day. He's now a minor celebrity in Japan that's released books and, believe it or not, is also a food critic of sorts, if I recall correctly. My grandmother. She's the storybook definition of the sweet southern grandma to your face, but a true snake in the grass. Our entire family believes she murdered my aunt, her oldest daughter. Even with our constant efforts, police refuse to look into it. She is, however, on our city's most wanted list for burglary at 78 years old. The bouncer at the Station nightclub in West Warwick, Rhode Island, refused to open an emergency exit and blocked the door during a fire. 100 people died. This is a terribly tragic story. You've seen footage of it, and yet I don't seek out the macabre, but I have because of its ties to music. Very tragic, just horrible on so many accounts. Nobody talks about it, but Floyd Mayweather beat his wife for years. She was writing a tell-all book and pressing charges against him when she was found dead, beaten in her car, parked in her driveway. They ruled it a drug overdose. Cindy Hendy, wife of the Toy Box Killer, took a plea deal to get a reduced sentence, and then they found videotapes of her actively helping in the kidnapping, torture, rape, and murder of multiple women. While she technically didn't get away, she did get a slap on the wrist for what she did. Honorable mention, Samuel Little. Samuel Little, known as the U.S.'s most prolific serial killer, died in 2020 but was in prison recently for murdering an estimated 93 people over 40 years. Active between 1970 and 2005, he went through numerous trials for over the decades, including murder in 82 and attempted murder and kidnapping 84, but either got acquitted or served only a short time before being released. He was released in 87, immediately started murdering people in the Los Angeles area. In 2012, his DNA was matched to the murder of Audrey Nelson, Carol Alford, Guadalupe Aducata. He was found guilty of their murders. In 2014, Little began to open to detectives with Little and details of dozens of other cases. If Little hadn't had confessed to the police, law enforcement may not have been able to link him to the other cases. He killed women living on the fringes of society, so they were less likely to be missed. Only 50 of the murdered women have been identified or confirmed so far. Imagine how many Samuel Littles there are that never spoke up. O.J. Simpson. If you read how he actually killed Nicole Brown and Ron Goldman and how vicious his attack was, you would be disgusted at the idea he is out golfing on the weekends. Casey Anthony, thank you. She had everything but how to kill my daughter in her history, stuff like how to make chloroform, foolproof suffocation methods, then lied to everyone about who took her daughter, had parts of her daughter's body in her car, and had taped up and buried her daughter not far from where she lived, then lied about it dozens of times, and changed her story like 3 to 4 times. Yet people still let her off. I don't get it. 14-year-old Konorak Synthumsophone ran away from Jeffrey Dahmer and sought help from a woman named Glenda Cleveland, who called the police. Officers John A. Balzarak and Joseph P. Gabrish let Dahmer take him back to his apartment, where he was soon murdered. Can you imagine? 14 years old. A man just drilled a hole in your skull and poured boiling water into it, and you finally get away? You think you're saved. But the people who are supposed to protect you hand you back to your torturer, who kills you, and they don't even lose their effing jobs. If there's any justice in the afterlife, Balzarak and Gabrish are spending every second undergoing the same hell they forced Konorak back into. My mother. 23 years ago, my mother and stepdad had to make a deal with the local gangs of Indianapolis to pay a drug debt that would end in bloodshed. My poor grandma, my mother's mother, was to be the hit. My mother hadn't talked to her mother in 3 years, but got her to sign life insurance policy. Stepdad worked at Western Southern Life Insurance Company at the time. There's a whole bunch more details to this story to make it completely crazy. I personally hate my mother, and I'm hoping to get stepdad to confess while he's on his deathbed. He's dying of stage 4 cancer. This way, my mother will serve time for her horrible act towards her mother. Rest in peace, Grandma. I love and miss you. 12/1/98. Died by execution style at work. All for cocaine. I was gonna say Casey Anthony. Then I saw it posted once, so I didn't. But as I continued, I realized, yeah, scroll for about 50 answers or so, and there she is again. So I'm gonna 102nd that and say F that bitch. Casey Anthony should 100% be in prison or dead. Agreed. I bet you thought that I was not going to comment on the Casey Anthony one 2 stories ago, but they did it again, so I don't care. Listen, maybe I don't know everything, but I feel very confident that that woman absolutely murdered her child. If you don't think I'm right, please let me know in the comments below. How is she walking around? Andrew Jeremy Wakefield. F this loathsome piece of shit is all I can say. Homeboy guy on YouTube has a video called Vaccines and Autism, a Measured Response, that digs deep into the topic of the anti-vax movement. In short, this one guy is basically responsible for all of it, and there's receipts of that claim in the video. That, however, isn't what I think he got away with for that. I'm thinking about how he abused multiple young children, almost killing one, giving them surgical procedures like lumbar punctures and colonoscopies. The reports from the nurses are simply horrifying, and that mother effer should have died in a cell. Again, receipts in the video. It's almost 2 hours long, and you might not enjoy his bits of humor, but it's mainly about the content of his deep dive into the topic, and this guy dives deep. Carla Homoka. I think I spelled her name right, but I don't care if I butchered it. She and her husband, Paul Bernardo, murdered at least 3 or 4 girls, one of which was her own sister. They also brutally raped them and drugged them. Paul is rotting in jail for life as we speak. Carla dodged life by doing a plea deal by claiming he was the murderer and she was his accomplice. That wasn't the case, though, and evidence was later shown that it wasn't. Too late, though. She only got 5 years and is walking free as we speak. She has since remarried to a different guy and has kids with said guy. By the way, they're both Canadian, so I'm not sure how their court system works specifically, so yeah. But honestly, she deserves to rot alongside Bernardo. Amy Marcos. She's the mastermind behind the murder of Archimedes Trajano during the martial law era of the Philippines back in 1977, but has refused to take accountability. Now, the presidential sister, she also holds a Senate seat. A deaf guy named Maverick William Fisher. The guy has long-time mental issues and murdered a guy he went camping with. Jury found him not guilty, however. He was recently released. He's clearly guilty when he explained it to my group in Vegas during the World Deaf Expo in Vegas this summer. The killer of Tim McLean. He was trying to get home on a Greyhound bus and was stabbed to death, beheaded, and cannibalized for no reason besides sitting next to a very disturbed man who is now walking free due to the insanity plea. The only case that truly messed me up after learning about it. The Greyhound bus killer, Will Baker. I believe he is formerly known as Vince Lee. This case is one of the most horrific murders I've ever heard about. He was submitted to a mental health facility and released in 2015. If not in prison, he should have stayed locked up absolutely anywhere. Caitlyn Jenner killed someone while driving, avoided jail and prison time due to an $800,000 settlement and an investigation into vehicular manslaughter that felt all too rushed and not in earnest. The investigation basically said that being the cause of a car accident shows some negligence, but not enough negligence to say that Caitlyn Jenner was negligent. She plowed into a car, only braking a second or two before impact, which was sent into oncoming traffic, killing the driver. Caitlyn Jenner then proceeded to hit another car as well. Joseph Mengele, evil and sadistic Nazi doctor who selected people for gas chambers at Auschwitz and subjected many victims to cruel and deadly experiments during World War II, fled to Argentina after the Allied powers began closing in on Germany, evading the Nuremberg trials, and he even evaded capture from Nazi hunters many more times, before finally passing away in 1979 on the beach of Brazil while swimming. He never had justice served and got to live a relatively stress-free life, and even went back to Europe a couple of times without getting arrested. Not fair at all. Ethan Couch. Ethan Anthony Couch, born April 11, 1997, is an American who at age 16 killed 4 people while driving under the influence on June 15, 2013 in Burleson, Texas. Couch, while intoxicated and under the influence of drugs, was driving on a restricted license and speeding in a residential area when he lost control of his vehicle, colliding with a group of people assisting another driver with a disabled SUV. Then, during the trial, G. Dick Miller, a psychologist hired as an expert by the defense, testified in court that the teen was a product of affluenza and was unable to link his actions with consequences because of his parents teaching him that wealth buys privilege. It was initially reported that, as part of his sentencing, their son would be sent for teen substance abuse and mental health rehabilitation to Newport Academy, an upscale residential treatment center in Newport Beach, California, which costs upward of $450,000 annually. Following a court hearing closed to the public, Judge Boyd instead sentenced Couch to an unspecified lockdown rehabilitation facility at his parents' expense. The time Couch would have to stay there was also unspecified. Yeah. You see, again, in my opinion, in America, being rich doesn't make you not guilty of murder. It just helps you not get convicted of murder. Affluenza? What a joke. Carolyn Bryant, the woman that got Emmett Till tortured and murdered. She not only is walking free and alive, but published a book crying about how she's the real victim. Meanwhile, the child's memorial plaque is still being shot full of bullets by racist curs. F. Carolyn Bryant. She deserves everything bad to happen to her. A curse on her and all her descendants.